Continuing the celebration of Tweety at 80, there's a new trailer for King Tweety, which I'm dying to talk about, as well as so much more in the world of Looney Tunes. So, of course, you realize this means podcast. Hello, and welcome to, of course, you realize this means podcast. With me today is such a wonderful pairing of collective pop culture and cinema-loving minds, and I can't wait to talk to them about Looney Tunes. They are the hosts of a wonderful podcast called Kicking and Screaming. Thank you for being here, Vanessa and Elijah. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having us. We're very sorry to anybody Googling that we're not Jenna Elfman and her son or husband, who also has a podcast of the same name.
Yeah, we are the superior Kicking and Screaming podcast because we are the one that's about martial arts and horror movies.
Yeah, the name actually makes sense for us. Change your name, Jenna Elfman.
Yeah, you don't talk about martial arts kicks or horror movie screams, so I don't know where that title's coming from. but we're not here to talk about Jenna Elfman.
Not on this podcast. We have before because she's a big part of a Looney Tunes movie. But...
Oh, yes, she is.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
But yes, okay, not to be confused with no shade, not to be confused with her show. But you guys have a wonderful show, and I want you to tell our audience about it.
Yeah, it's very much in the name. We love double features and the double feature movie experience because oftentimes it's not necessarily something that might be recent or new. Sometimes it can be, but it's always something that's very much programmed just for entertainment value. It doesn't really exist for a cycle. So They're my favorite audiences. They're people that are just there because they're very excited to either watch something for the first time or take in something very beloved and dissect it with like-minded folks. And we started the podcast during the pandemic, so it was very much something that we desperately missed. And we wanted to create that feeling. And so Elijah's actually hosted a movie series called
37th Chamber.
37th Chamber.
Cool.
It was a series that we would run out of the Alamo Draft House in Colorado, where every month we would do a classic martial arts movie. And we would always open the film with a martial arts demonstration, which generally would be like a very skilled martial arts practitioner would come in and kind of beat me up before the movie and be like, here's how you throw a guy around. I would always pride myself on being the only host at the Alamo Draft House who had to sign a safety waiver for his film series because I would be like choked unconscious and thrown around, which was very fun.
Yeah, and like my background was I'd been writing for Fangoria and had been on a sketch team, horror comedy sketch team called Night Church, and I was like the resident horror person at El Rey for a while. So it was kind of kismet that these two things not only go together well, but that was like the individual things that we brought to the show. Even though Elijah's a massive horror head himself. And I ended up becoming a big martial arts fan by the end of the show because like after a certain point, I've seen like at least 100 martial arts movies.
Yeah, my stealth agenda with the podcast was just to force my wife to watch as many martial arts movies as possible.
And now I'm annoying. Now somebody at work is just like, oh man, Kill Bill's great. I'm like, actually! So thank you for making me the worst.
Yeah, anytime.
I grew up on Jet Li, and you recently did a couple of his earlier films, and I remember Contract Killer was big in my like high school years.
Yes.
And like all those weird ones that you find on the dollar shelves or, like hidden in Blockbuster.
Oh, the one, Black Mask, the like kind of like late 90s, early 2000s.
I wish I could find Black Mask somewhere.
Black Mask.
I was going to bring up the one because you said that recently that was your favorite Jet Li movie up until
that is
the
Vanessa's favorite.
That was my favorite, and it made Elijah mad because he's like, there are better Jet Li movies, and I'm like, yeah, but none of them have Down with the Sickness.
This is true. This is true.
So until that happens, the one is my favorite Jet Li movie.
I can't argue with it.
You called me a shithead.
That's probably accurate.
It is so wacky, but I mean,
Yeah.
talk about like ahead of its time. It was dealing with multiverse and like
Yeah.
all of the stuff that we are like being inundated with now in cinemas. And it had Jet Li playing 27 different versions of himself, which
And
are
heavy with the
radically
needle
different.
drops.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I hadn't really considered it before, but I do think that without Jet Li's The One, modern science fiction wouldn't exist. just saying it.
Jet Li
I'll say it.
is our like. Why can't I think of anything but L. Ron Hubbard?
That is the only science fiction writer you can
Jules
think of.
Verne. My God.
Jules Verne. Yes.
I could have said Jules Verne. I could
Isaac
have said,
Asimov.
I could have said Isaac Asimov.
Aldous Huxley.
I could have said Aldous Huxley. I could have said Ray Bradbury. But for some reason,
But
the
no.
only science
L. Ron
fiction writer I
Hubbard.
can think of is L. Ron Hubbard. I've been living in Los Angeles too long.
So yes, I highly recommend tracking down this podcast and giving it a listen. Your chemistry on the show is one of my favorite aspects of it.
Thank you.
Because the way you banter back and forth is so endearing, and you know, it just feels like we're joining a conversation that has been going on for years, and it's so lovely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
That was very
So-
sweet. Thank you.
So you are Vanessa. Your SNES is in your Twitter handle
Yes.
name. So you are a lover of video games, correct?
Big time. I actually used to write for XPlay.
Okay.
I'm over at Attack of the Show now, but when I was at XPlay, I was very lucky because the summer that I was writing there, no new games had come out, which meant I basically
Wow.
had carte blanche because it was, an entire pandemic had just happened. Most developers had put out everything that they'd been making at the beginning of the pandemic, and then there was a huge gap in everything being delayed and then basically being pushed into this year. So while I was at XPlay, it was basically just this season of nothing dropping except for Psychonauts 2 and some other stuff. And I took that as carte blanche to do whatever I wanted for the retro gaming
Yes.
or indie gaming. So I left before I had to write about anything new, which was very lucky for me because I was just yeah, I will write about Sonic 2 Battle till the cows come home. I don't know if I have as much to say about Horizon Forbidden West.
Sure.
And I mostly speculated on Elden Ring. But I very much love gaming. I'm just not the hippest on it.
Same. But you and I share a love for retro gaming, and that is why I have both of you on to
Yes.
talk about every game. We're not going to go into every game, listeners. There's way too many. There's actually over 100 games. I don't know if you know this. There's over 100 games with Looney Tunes / Tiny Toons / Animaniacs characters out there. We're not touching on all of them. We're touching on the ones that mean the most to us. And the biggest one is the Tiny Toons game Buster Breaks Loose, or Bust Loose. Why is it not called Buster Breaks Loose? It's Bus.
They want us to say bust twice.
Because he's Buster.
And he busts.
And he busts.
There we go.
It's what he does.
Busting makes me feel good.
And
That's how
we're
we're
going to
doing it.
dive so deep into all of the mechanics of that, the story, and what made that game so memorable for us as children. But also, it's really playable right now, replayable, and I found it, and I was like, wow, this game holds up.
It holds up shockingly well. I had played it kind of briefly as a kid, honestly. As a kid, it was a game that my cousin had, so I played it at his house a few times.
Okay.
Did not get very good at it or ever beat it, and I didn't actually go back and really put in the hours until I worked at a video game store, a retail place that sold retro games for years, and so I would come in and just kind of arbitrarily pick a title, throw it on, and play it on slow days. And there was a period of time that we got really into Buster Bust Loose. So this was maybe 6-7 years back, not that long ago, and it holds up. It's a legitimately great platformer by modern design standards.
It truly is. And the mechanics of the controls and it's so intuitive, and you can just pick it up and just run with it. And that's one of the things that Buster actually does, is he has the ability to run up walls, and it's one of the best dynamics of the game. But I'm going to get into all of that with you later. first, we're going to talk about some Looney Tunes news. That encompasses a new trailer we have for a brand new Looney Tunes movie with a kind of bizarre take on Tweety and Sylvester and Granny. And this is called King Tweety.
Look, is someone here a long-lost member of the royal family?
Hey, that's me!
Meet the new royal family.
King Tweety, first of his name!
Now this is the life!
This pillow, this bird bath, this plush carpet is for me? Being king is the greatest!
And it is written and directed by Karine Engel and story by Eric Adolphson. And the really fun fact there is Eric Adolphson is a documentary filmmaker.
What?
And he's writing a Looney Tunes movie.
That is fascinating. What are some of his previous credits, like in terms of documentary? I guess it wouldn't matter either way. My mind immediately went to like, oh, has he done nature documentaries about birds? Which
Right?
still wouldn't make sense.
It'd be a better one-to-one though. Like, what if we find out that he was just like Genghis Khan? Like,
right.
So he did a series on a travel blog. The History of Comedy was one of his documentaries. And he was a producer on a short in 2009 called Civil, which is it's around the end of the Civil War and around the story of a young Confederate soldier and basically where the loyalties are tested for his very soul. So
much
really,
like the loyalties between Sylvester and
And
Tweety.
there's the one-to-one.
There you go.
there we go.
I've always thought Sylvester's not unlike a Confederate.
Absolutely not.
There's the connection. There we go. And Karine Engel is no slouch when it comes to animation. She was behind Unikitty for Cartoon Network.
Oh,
wow.
And she's also director on Jellystone as well as Teen Titans Go. And
Wow, that
she
kind of
has-
explains a lot of the art style and choices in it.
exactly.
Yeah.
it
It's like
is.
the trailer. It's a very like modern animation style, and it makes sense with
Right.
like Jellystone, Teen Titans Go. It's like a similar kind of aesthetic. It's very
And
cool.
for me, when I watch it, I get little tones of the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, which that was a
Mm.
series in the early 90s.
I remember
And
that.
I'm wondering if this is going to be sort of like a small reboot of that in a sense. Because
Mhm.
if this takes off, they could do this as a series.
You know, actually, I'm very thankful I can finally say this on a podcast that actually knows what I'm referencing because I've brought this up a million other times. It's this dynamic that I love that very much like started on Looney Tunes. That every iteration of I see it, but Looney Tunes did it the best of like Mark Anthony and Pussyfoot.
Yes.
So do you know Mark Anthony and Pussyfoot?
Yeah.
So thank you for literally the first time in my life I've been in a room with everybody that actually knows what
You're
I'm
amongst
talking
friends
about
here.
when I say these things because I say it to everyone else and they're like, what are you referring to? Anytime it's the dynamic of like big thing have to protect dumb little thing.
Yeah.
It's my favorite cartoon thing that I've never quite seen done as well as like when the small thing isn't even aware of like the danger that is present.
Yes.
And Looney Tunes does that. Like I think everything else like blurs the dynamic a little bit more in a way that like doesn't make the consequence as funny as if they're not trying to get credit at any point.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. So you think that dynamic is going to show up in this movie somewhere?
I think a little bit because that was something that I saw a lot whenever there was like the initial two pairings. Like I would say probably like at the beginning of that era of animation that I haven't seen as much since, but I'm seeing it come back now. Like there's a few cartoons that I think of that like come to mind now as of recently that are like kind of similar. Like the last thing that I felt like that really did it and played with it was like the parody intro cartoon in Roger Rabbit. Because it was Roger and Baby.
Yes.
Oh,
So
right,
it
right.
had like a similar, and like that's the last time I saw that like really mined that way. But lately with this new era of animation, because it's like cartoon slapstick has a place again, because you're getting like the scrunched in faces and like the very like silly hyper reacts. You're watching that be like an interesting thing to mine.
Yeah.
Again.
And I forgive me, I have not kept up with some of the more recent like Looney Tunes output. I've watched some, but not all of the shorts on like the Looney Tunes cartoons, HBO Max reboot. But watching the trailer for King Tweety, it seems like the dynamic is Sylvester having to protect Tweety from, you know, potentially assassins on this island that are like, Tweety becomes the new ruler, so there's now, you know, political intrigue and assassinations. But I was like, I had the moment of, I guess, two immediate questions, like having not, you know, kept up with every, you know, recent iteration. I was surprised by the aesthetic and the animation style, and I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, if that, if Tweety and Sylvester have looked exactly like this before, or if this is a unique aesthetic to this film.
It is also a very unique aesthetic to just this film.
Oh, okay. See, I want to talk more about that, but also the dynamic of Sylvester being put in this kind of like, clandestine like guardian role, apparently, you know, protecting Tweety from like assassination attempts. Is that like a dynamic that we've seen more of? Because you know, to my mind, I'm like, no, he's always trying to get Tweety, right? Yeah,
absolutely. That's a fantastic observation from both of you. And to that point, no, he's never been put in this situation. He is always the antagonizer to Tweety. So having him in this role, and also the introduction of all these dogs, that's always a question mark, because it's either Sylvester's going after Tweety and then there's a dog protecting Tweety, or there's a dog somewhere and they're a mystery player in all of this because we don't know what alliance they have. And it seems like from the trailer, which isn't a whole lot, the dogs are the guards. And I don't see Sylvester going after Tweety so much in this trailer. So I'm wondering if they have a false job title and they're actually working for somebody else. But yes, there's definitely a political intrigue to be had.
Yeah. I'm going to random speculate.
Okay.
As to what I think the thing is.
Okay.
Because I thought of two things, like two pieces of cartoon media that have like done a storyline before that like this is giving me tones of. One is dang it, I'm trying to remember the other one, but I remember the first one. One is Courage the Cowardly Dog, in which they're in the future and everyone's a banana and they're ruled by bananas. Do you remember? And then he goes to meet the King Banana, but the King Banana is actually a monkey in a banana suit that's been eating all of the other bananas.
That episode is disturbing. Yeah, yes.
So there's another one that's similar, and that is Five Goes West, in which it's a cat that's dressing up like a rat. And I feel like this might be like something that is not a dog pretending to be dog thing.
Oh, yeah.
That they're protecting. So I'm because that's a cartoon thing that I've seen like done in cartoons before as like a plot line that you see every few years.
You think it could be another cat or something?
I think it's either like another cat or like a bird that's like dressed up like a dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Gonna be some twist there. That could be fun.
Can I just say I love that you brought up Five Goes West? Like that is from my childhood. That is like that was one of the best animated going experiences I've ever had.
I loved it so much. My mom was obsessed with all the Fievel series because that's how she explained immigration to me.
Oh. I like wore out that VHS tape as a kid. So good.
Did you also like have was yours Somewhere Out There, or are there No Cats in America?
No Cats in America.
Mine was Somewhere Out There. Actually, mine's Dreams to Dream. Mine's Dreams to Dream.
Oh!
Because when I moved out here, I would listen to that every single night before bed. And it was my like motivation to get up the next day and like push forward in a film career.
Oh,
Bible rips.
It does. Rip.
So as the more seasoned professional of Looney Tunes media, what's your take on this trailer? I want to hear what you think of this aesthetic first of all, because my first thought was like, is this going to be polarizing for like longtime fans? Because
the answer is yes.
Was so unique.
I can already tell you the answer is yes. My reaction was honestly slightly soured by the aesthetic of the character designs, because whenever we think of Tweety, we don't think of like this gigantic weird head, and whenever they're shocked, they had like the less descript eyes, and it was just like two dots inside a bowl of white, and
Yeah.
those little aesthetic choices were like, I feel like this is aiming younger than
Yeah.
what the HBO Max show is going for. And that was my first instinct of, oh, they're putting out content for Tweety to also encompass fans that don't know they like Tweety yet, but they will. And so it's bringing in a younger demographic, which I am all about. And obviously we have Bugs Bunny Builders on the way. That's a preschool show that's going to have all the characters like doing construction, and it's going to be super fun. But with this, I think you could go either way. I mean, with the Unikitty background, I know that they're going to go abstract and they're going to go like lucid dream sections, and those are going to be kind of adult. But the overall storyline, I have no idea what they're going to do. But I'm very intrigued. And after having settled with it and sat on it and thought about it, I think I really like this direction. And the more voices we have in Looney Tunes, the broader of a stroke they can paint with these characters. And as I've always been saying, they're malleable. You can have Bugs Bunny in any world, and he will conform to that world and make it funny and do his thing. And I think the same can be said about Tweety and Sylvester. So I am all about this, and I can't wait to see how this story plays out.
Heck yeah.
Heck
Love
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Hearing you say, like, you can take these characters and put them into, essentially any universe and potentially any kind of aesthetic or style, just reminds me of seeing old, like, storyboard and concept art pages that were, like, kind of internal, I think, like, Bible pages for classic characters like Bugs.
Oh
that
yeah,
talk
I
about,
love the
like,
Academy Museum.
yeah, and the notes, being like, these are like the unbreakable proportions, and here's like why they work. Here's why his feet need to be this big. Here's why his ears need to look like this or whatever. And I remember like reading it, and it felt like there was almost this like kind of mathematical formula of like, here is why Bugs Bunny will always be funny and charming. You know, and reading it and like how those kind of proportions or mechanics are like pieces of design applied to like when you're creating a new character, like here are the boxes that you check. It was like fascinating to me because it really made me appreciate the degree to which they I like kind of like cracked a code with these characters that really does like not that there was ever not legitimacy to it, but the degree to which they're timeless and iconic. I think a lot of the time it's easy to look at something that's been in the pop culture zeitgeist for so long and say like, well, yeah, it got there early.
Yeah, right.
It was like
Yes.
it was like one of the first ones, so that's why it was big. But you see something like that and you're like, oh no, there's such a like thoughtfulness to the design and such a brilliance to the design of these characters that you can take Tweety Bird and put it in this very like very modern, kind of Gen Z or even like Gen Alpha skewing animation style that does feel a little more like a Teen Titans Go, or so something that is very much not like our generation of animation, but the characters still work and like the expressions still read, and you're like, yeah, that's still
That
Tweety
was
and
Tiny
Sylvester.
Toons for me.
That's
That's exactly
Toons.
what it's just what Tiny Toons is, and it's why Tiny Toons worked, because it was basically like it had certain like universal, these are Looney Tunes rules, but also this is not Bugs, this is not Daffy, this is not like any of these. So you get to like have these liberties because they are their own characters. They just exist in that universe, and they lampoon things similarly. They
Absolutely.
The references were just closer to something I would understand. And yeah, by closer, I mean like Twilight Zone references versus Clark Gable references, but still.
Yeah.
Well, they also had Michael Keaton's Batman show up in that show a couple times.
That's true.
And so they did pull from more modern pop culture phenomena that was happening at the time. But absolutely, you have to have parody in a Looney Tunes property. And I think with the history that Sylvester and Tweety have, especially with that earlier show from the 90s, the mystery solving one, there could be an element of intrigue around something going on there, as we've already discussed. But yes, I wholeheartedly agree that there are certain things about these characters that if you hold true to, such as Tweety's baby talk, like the way that he's so curious but also so bedazzled by everything in his world, like, and whenever that's in the trailer, you see that.
Yeah, it's the earnestness and the aw shucks of it that like
Yes.
keeps Tweety likable, because you can see Tweety in so many scenarios in which like he would be the villain if it wasn't for that just very like earnest kind of like, oh geez.
Sure. But to pair this new design with some of the classic voice acting is a really smart move. So we have friends of the podcast, Eric Bauza and Candy Milo, returning for Granny and Tweety, respectively. And Eric is also doing the voice of Sylvester in this, so he gets both characters. And we also have voice actor Flula Borg, John Daly, and Clarice Burke joining
John
the cast.
Daly.
So, yeah,
Nice.
so there's
Love
some
John Daly and Flula Borg actually.
heavy hitters. So yeah, I can't wait for this to come together. And it recently had a release date drop, so we can expect this in June.
Very cool.
Now that we know that.
One last thing on the aesthetic for this one. Did either of you get kind of Ren and Stimpy vibes?
A little bit
from some moments in the trailer.
Yes.
There were, like,
yes,
there were
I did.
a few beats that like it was like something. I think Sylvester. I forget what happens to him, but something happens where his face looks kind of messed up, like he gets hit with a boat.
He gets bonked on the head, but like in a really gnarly way.
Yeah.
It's specifically another Ren and Stimpy moment, which is when the dog is beating him and he's like, bark, 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 and like they're just saying bark instead of doing it. That also like feels very John Kay and that kind of set, that like very like I'm gonna say the thing instead of doing the actual onomatopoeia for it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something I see more like now too, that I think about it. Like if you think about like Doug and Disney, where it's arf, it's not dog noise.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's a good point. But yeah, the bark really stood out to me as well, as like that's an interesting choice. So we'll see how it all comes together, but I'm excited to actually watch this. So that'll be coming to DVD. I don't know if it doesn't have a HBO Max release date yet, but it'll be coming to DVD on June 14th. So we can look forward to that. And because I have a video game centered show right now, I'm going to bring up Multiversus. I haven't talked about this yet, but the trailer came out about a month ago and it has a 2022 general release date. So we don't know when, but it's going to be available on Twitch, PS4, PS5, all the Xboxes. And this is the first ever Warner Media character brawler game that I'm so excited about, because we finally have what we've always wanted: Batman and Bugs Bunny teaming up to pummel Harley Quinn and Wonder Woman or whoever
and Arya Stark.
And Arya Stark, yeah.
Are there actual voiced characters in this?
Yes. So
they have a leg up on Nickelodeon already.
Yeah.
So they are taking their time with this one. And one of the things that I really love is they have a mechanic in there where Wonder Woman, let's say you're on Wonder Woman's team and she wants to save you, she can actually go to the edge of the stage and rip her lasso around your waist and pull you back up.
Yes, that's one of the things in this, just from like a fighting game meta or like game design perspective, that does look interesting, because there are like a lot of character brawlers, ever since like the success of Super Smash Brothers on the Nintendo 64. It's been a thing that like people have replicated, because it's a pretty like straightforward fundamental template. And so if you're any brand that has recognizable characters, it's like, oh yeah, let's make one of those. So we've seen a ton of them, but like most of them do not necessarily add anything new. And there are of course like exceptions. There some like indie games that have done like a very cool job of trying to like innovate with that formula. But I was genuinely impressed to see that like from a company like Warner that has such a huge stable of characters, it would have been very easy for them to just say like, yeah, here's all our characters, and it's a Super Smash Brothers clone. It does all the same things that Smash Brothers does. So I was genuinely impressed that there was any element that I had not necessarily seen before, and the fact that it's this kind of focus on like cooperative play and like team-based attacks. So if you're having like a 2-on-2 fight, different characters will have ways to like potentially power each other up, to like save each other, to like bounce off of each other in interesting ways.
It's almost like picking teams from a MMO, where it's like, are you a healer? Are you a cleric? Like, what are you bringing to the table?
Right. And just even, just like in a fighting game context, knowing, like, okay, if it's a team-based fight, like, I have these moves that can interact with your character in this way, does add, like, an interesting wrinkle to the meta of the game that, I was surprised to see, because they genuinely, like, they could have, made this game without any... with very minimal effort. So the fact that like the developers are putting thought into like, no, we want unique mechanics, we want this to stand out, gives me some hope that it might be cool.
Here's what I'm curious about. Like,
what's that?
I'm wondering what it's gonna do for online gaming specifically. Smash clones typically tend to do well for like the first few weeks when they come out, when it comes to like the online gaming circuit, because online gamers are specifically looking for something to dethrone Smash. Finally, because if for those that aren't familiar, Smash is like, one of the funnest, I mean, not since Melee, funnest versions to play of that game, but Nintendo makes it notoriously really difficult to stream that game, especially if it's not like two people in the same room. Nintendo makes it very, very hard to stream that game and to like really have any kind of like stance or place when it comes to like online fighting game streaming versus other games that are like far better equipped to do so, and also the people behind them care more about that experience. And so anytime there's a potential for a Smash clone to dethrone, they tend to jump on it. But there was a hope that All-Star Brawl was going to be that, because it also had a lot of the things that Melee had that has been since left out. Not there. So if this game, in addition to like the collaborative elements, actually does a better job of delivering like the online streaming element and like the ability for like people in two different places to like have the same experience and have it be more measured, it might also have like contention in some like esports categories as well, which would be cool.
That would be amazing. I love the fact that this trailer starts out with Tony Hung talking about the inspiration behind it and like how much he wants to have this game exist, and like what he goes through to be like, the team has been working on these different aspects because we haven't seen these aspects done in this type of game before, and we want to add that to the conversation, like to the plethora of all these brawlers that are already out there. What if they could be better? What if they could do these things? And I really hope that it does not dethrone, but like join the conversation with Smash as far as top brawlers, if you want to have a character versus character game. I think that would be great.
Same. And I always kind of go back and forth where like I have this very like I'm an adult and I'm cynical, so whenever a new one is announced, there's the initial kind of rolling my eyes like, oh, another company is doing another Super Smash Brothers. It's another kind of like boilerplate knockoff, and also the immediate kind of negative response to every realization of like which companies own like 60% of pop culture, where I'm like, oh yeah, I guess they just own everything. We have a couple of monopolies. So there's part of me that immediately has a resistance, and then part of me that is still like 12 years old, and my mind is blown by like an arcade cabinet of Marvel vs. Capcom, and I'm like, you can fight Wolverine now? And so I always, almost want to be like, this is gonna be dumb, and then I watch the trailer and I'm like, it does look cool when Bugs Bunny fights Batman, though. and I genuinely want it to be good. I want to love it.
And they have Kevin Conroy as Batman, and they have Eric Bauza as Bugs Bunny. I mean, like, they went out and got the voice talent. Like, if they're the modern versions of these characters, and Arya Stark, as you're talking about, it's the actual actress from Game of Thrones voicing her in the game. It's top tier quality, I think, is what they're going for.
Yeah.
I appreciate that they have picked kind of like a cohesive art style for all the characters, because you don't expect them to look like they should share a screen together. Like when you hear the character lineup, you're like, that's absurd. And then you look at them standing next to each other and you're like, no, that works.
There's like a Bible that's just like, these are the colors that are the throughs. These are like specific line work that exists in all of them that like, where it's like, okay, I believe you. In that very Space Jam kind of way.
Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a great point. So I need this game to come out. I need a release date.
It also like when you do, kind of put them in a similar enough aesthetic, like a similar enough art style and design that I like, that it makes sense to my brain, that I buy it when like Batman is standing next to Bugs Bunny. It makes you kind of realize that like you don't want to fight Bugs Bunny. Like he's a contender, it's like, oh yeah, he's like a gag character, and you're like, no, but he is very nearly omnipotent in a cartoon world. And so when you have Batman standing there in a cartoon character design, you're like, I think Bugs has the edge.
No, this man can take on all the powers of a Marx brother.
Yeah.
And I also love that his running attack is this fury of fists that flies. And that's it's very similar to Luigi's running attack. Mm-hmm. And I'm always Luigi in Smash Brothers. So I was like, oh, that's like near and dear to my heart.
Nice.
That's something that I feel like has been consistent with a lot of Looney Tune games, especially like watching a few old playthroughs of Buster Bust Loose, in which the SNES was such an era for like, we have this IP and we're going to use this IP, and then we literally do not care about making it seem like it's of the same world when you're in it, where it's just kind of like, yeah, it's the thing, but it looks nothing like the thing when it runs or punches or does anything, or like any of its objectives don't feel universal. And every Looney Tunes games, like when the sprites are animated to like run or fight, it is following the same animation like Bible that exists for its own universe.
Yeah. I feel like also in the like 16-bit era, Konami specifically was kind of killing it with licensed games, because they also did the Adventures of Batman and Robin.
Mm-hmm. They were absolutely in a league of their own.
Just like
Konami didn't suck.
Yeah. Before the developers that eventually became Treasure left, and they were still putting out stuff like Contra 3.
And they worked with Kojima?
Yeah.
And now, pachinko machines. But back then...
Yeah, they make a lot of money on the pachinko machines.
Yeah,
they're doing good.
And the MOBA.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a fantastic segue. Let's talk about Konami. They put out 4 Tiny Toons games in the span of 1 year, which is crazy, in 1992 in Japan. 1993 was when we got one of those games, which is the main topic, Tiny Toons Buster Bust Loose. And yeah, Konami, the company that brought us Metal Gear Solid, once upon a time had a life doing these little IP games, but man, did they slap.
It's fascinating to me now because they were both intuitive for like the child that picks it up, but also in certain ways had like so much pattern memory and so much like possibility for game breaking that it like could also be popular with somebody that's like obsessed with Metroidvanias that's looking for something like similar, because the game also had like multiple difficulties, and the only way you can actually get the final ending was like that big one, so it was like a treat.
Yeah, right. That was something I actually didn't know about it until doing like research for this. That
Same.
If you play it on the easier difficulty, you just don't play the last level, which is I think it's also it's a cool way to incentivize you to like gain a skill level at the game, to like become proficient enough that you're like, you know what, I can play it on the harder difficulties. I'm ready. It's cool that there's like bonus content for getting better at the game. But it's also interesting to me because I feel like there are very few examples of that in video games, where it's like the easiest mode isn't just that you have more lives, that you have more health, or enemies, there's less enemies, but the fact that like there's entire levels that you don't play, that they're just like, nah, that one's too hard. It was just like a very cool design choice.
The unique thing about that is in America, we had a version that had easy, normal, and hard, and in Japan, they had the children level, the normal level, and they had a challenge level, but nothing was as hard as our hard, which is interesting. So they actually made the game easier for people in Japan than the people here.
Which is fascinating because I feel like there's many instances of the reverse happening.
Yeah, I feel the same. There's certain cases where, like, in Japan, it's like the regeneration points are more difficult, or like you like don't take as much don't do as much damage on this certain level, and you can only like have it in the Japanese version. So
yeah. I mean, I think maybe the most like notorious example of that was Super Mario Brothers 2 on the NES. The North American release was a different game entirely, which is why Super Mario Brothers 2 on the NES here is super weird. It was actually a game called Doki Doki Panic, but they reskinned it with Mario characters. But it's the reason that it doesn't really play like any other Mario game, because it's just a different game mechanically. And they did that because the actual sequel to Super Mario Brothers in Japan for the NES was considered too difficult. And they were like, no, American audiences will be frustrated. And so it was later released here as Super Mario Lost Levels that was included as part of Mario All-Stars, which is like a compilation cartridge on the Super Nintendo. But yeah, like Lost Levels, I mean, they were right. It's frustratingly difficult. It's the one that had like the poison mushroom that kills you if you pick it up. It's a very hard game. But yeah, it's interesting to me to hear like different, I guess, publishers' schools of thoughts on different regions. But someone, at Konami was like, oh, the Americans love a challenge, but someone at Nintendo is like, they'll never play this. It's very interesting.
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall to hear those conversations, but I had no idea that that's what would happen with Mario Brothers 2. Because I always thought that was just like a fluke, like, because I love the third one and I love the first one, but that second one,
right? 2 is super weird. All the enemies are different. You like stand on things and pick them up and throw them instead of jumping on things' heads.
Right.
Yeah, and their way of explaining it away is that if you beat the game, the final scene is Mario waking up from a dream, and he's like, "That was a weird dream."
Well, the final level we're talking about here is you get to fight Plucky as a Darth Vader variant.
Yes, and so you have the cool little like kind of Star Wars lead in.
Star Wars parody, exactly, and that's what Looney Tunes is known for. So not only did they encompass the feel, the vibrancy, like just the creative game rewards and the mini games in this game of Tiny Toons, we had a bevy of characters that you could only find from this franchise in this game, as well as endless replayability, because it's so fun. The mechanics are so easy. It's so intuitive. And I picked it up and I was like, oh, I'm like 6 again. Like, this is amazing.
I imagine this would be very appealing to speedrunners.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's so much pattern memorization that you can actually like count frames per second and like set records for yourself on this.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I'm sure there are like some records for it already.
Yeah, some Bust or Bust Loose records where somebody's just like, I know that if I like hit this thing and I bonk off this at the right time, I shave off 3 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, I always you mentioned it earlier, but the like wall running where you can just run directly up a vertical surface.
That wall dashing.
Yeah, I love it because it's one, very cartoony. It feels it feels very at home in this universe. But it also is just such a fun kind of like unique traversal system, because I remember like, playing certain levels for the first time and almost like getting stuck for a minute before I remember like, oh yeah, this is not Mario, this is not Sonic the Hedgehog. I can run straight up. Yeah, Buster can just go straight up a wall. And yeah, they did some really fun stuff with that design. I remember there were like portions that would be vertical scrolling where you have to kind of stay ahead of the camera essentially, like the levels chasing you, and you're just like running up a little zigzag. Just very cool design kind of mechanics that really did set it apart from other 16-bit platformers at the time. Even like Buster's like primary attack, rather than just jumping on enemies, you have to jump and kind of time a little like backflip kick.
Yes.
Which, I thought was very cool because it makes it a little more active. It feels a little more engaging than just jumping on them. You have to like there's a hitbox to it. There's timing to it. It feels a little more like action based, which is cool.
I think that's the Vania part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you had to be very careful where you're jumping to begin with, because if you're jumping underneath another villain, you'll get dinged. And, so that could be disastrous if you're not using it correctly.
Or you have parts of the level that fall away if you touch it one time, or like
Right,
something that'll like chip off and then something underneath that can shoot at you.
Yeah, there's one of the later levels that's like kind of vertical like climb where you're up in the sky and you're jumping on different like bubbles and balloons. And I remember like the bubbles pop if you stay on them for too long.
Yeah.
Very stressful level, but really cool design.
And I don't know. I was trying to recollect if I had actually gotten to that level with Darth Vader. I don't think I saw that. So I don't actually think I played this game on hard when I had it.
I know I didn't. Because
that was
I'm
all
only
new to me.
Yeah. Like I'm only now to a point in which I have the patience to like replay a platformer on a difficult level. Yeah. Because as a child I was just like, nope, get me to the last screen.
Oh, see, I very much because we didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid. We would generally have one video game at a time, and I remember there was a pawn shop in our neighborhood that would let us. Basically, they sold all video games for the same price, no matter what it was. So you could bring in a cartridge for a Super Nintendo game. Yeah. And just trade it straight across for another one because they're like, I sell them all for the same price. So we would basically have one game at a time, and I would have to just play that game until it was time to, take it to the pawn shop and swap it for the other one. But because of that, I would like obsessively play every game that I had. So whenever I owned something, even if it was a super difficult and obnoxious platformer, I'd be like, well, this is all I've got for 6 months, so I have to play it.
So did you reach that last level?
So because I still have that like kind of ingrained mentality of if a game is punishingly difficult, I'm like, well, I've committed to doing almost obsessively. In the game store days, we did make it to that last level, and I can say that last boss fight, I hate it. I think it's very it's very cool and creative, as I think all of the boss fights are. Each one kind of has like a unique way to damage them.
Yeah. You also call it punishing?
I would call it punishing. It's so frustrating because it's not or was not for me like immediately intuitive how to do anything in this. It's like a single screen where he has a big gun that can spin around, and you can't like always attack him directly. You have to kind of hit the gun to spin it to hit him. Oh, but yeah, I remember I would get to that boss and then be confused and frustrated quite a few times before I had it dialed in.
I was just vibing off the soundtrack.
Oh, great soundtrack!
Win or lose, it is the perfect example. It makes me think of like Scott Pilgrim's soundtrack being pulled to Anamanaguchi being pushed to game. And it being like so perfect in universe for each thing. And I feel like this is like the perfect, like, what if suddenly the Tiny Toons were digitized?
Yeah. No, like a chiptune Tiny Toons soundtrack.
I've got to say, all the games we're going to be discussing today have killer soundtracks. Like, I don't know who's in charge of music for all of these, but they really went hard, and it shows because I think I'm gonna make a compilation of just like the best sounds and like make their own like mix. But it's so good.
Send me that playlist.
Exactly. Yeah. So to bring in a horror element, there's one character that only showed up in one Tiny Toon episode, and for whatever reason, they have appeared in multiple Tiny Toon games, and the digitized version of this character freaks me out. I don't know if you if you need to pull up a photo, but Dr. Gene Splicer is a mad scientist in this world, and I swear to you it's a parody of somebody, but I cannot place it, and nothing online has the parody, but this character digitized scared me as a kid.
Let me see.
We're pulling up the image of Gene Splicer now.
It is so scary.
Do you know which games he's appeared in?
He has appeared in. Well, it says.
He's in Buster Bust Loose for sure. He's
Buster Bust
I think
Loose.
Second boss fight, you fight his monster. Yeah.
Yes. And he is also in the next game we're going to be talking about, which is Buster's Hidden Treasures. which was on Sega Genesis.
What is?
Oh, she just pulled up a sprite of
I
Gene
think I
Splicer.
know. It's because he looks like a villain in a Japanese kids morning show.
I was gonna say, the reason I was
Oh.
asking specifically which games, my guess, because this was not uncommon at the time, a lot of Japanese developers would have this tendency to kind of latch on to characters who, regardless of like popularity in the West, aesthetically, they felt would appeal to like the local Japanese audience. And I think, because this was pre like internet, before
Yeah.
culture was as readily available in different regions, so they wouldn't necessarily always have the same metric for like, oh, which characters are popular, but they would take the aesthetic of one that's like, oh, this looks like a Power Rangers villain,
Yeah.
essentially. This
Sure.
looks like a Kamen Rider character or something. And so they would latch onto it because it's fun. There's a lot of like 80s and 90s media where you will find out that like the most popular character from that franchise in Japan is like, oh, that was a dude who was in one episode of the first season,
Yeah.
but there's so much merchandise in Japan because publishers over there were like, no, this is the hit. This is the character you want.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think I might have landed on what could be the thing about Gene Splicer. Were you also afraid of Angelica's dream little brother on the Rugrats?
I want to say yes.
He was like the giant baby, and he had like a shirt that's like big boy
Yes.
on it, and like okay.
Mhm.
Gene Splicer and said baby have two things in common, and that is human lips on a cartoon face.
Oh.
That's
a
why I
good
found
theory.
both
Good
of them
observation.
upsetting. And if you think there are like other characters and things that are also equally upsetting, and it's when you put human lips on a cartoon guy face.
So you get kind of an uncanny valley thing.
A little bit.
Yeah.
That
Because
might
like
be
they're
it.
not like Jessica Rabbit puffy, because even those are still like cartoony in a sense.
Yeah.
These are like hyper detailed, portioned to the face but feels wrong human lips.
Yeah.
Because you know who they would do this a lot to, and they would do this to like gross you out.
Huh.
John Dilworth on Courage the Cowardly Dog. He put human lips on anything he wanted to make like extra unsettling.
That's right.
Wow.
He would do like kind of a mixed media thing where it would be like live action.
Oh, yes.
He would either have a mouth or he would draw oversized human lips on like villainous characters.
Yeah, Angry Orange always freaked me out too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I very much I think was too old to be in the demographic for that at the time. But I remember like the first time my niece was like, "This is a thing that I like." I was so horrified.
A friend voiced something on that.
Oh, that's right.
Cassim cucumber on it.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So yeah, this character shows up twice after only appearing in one Tiny Toons episode. But before we leave Buster Bust Loose, I just wanted to talk about the Wheel of Comedy, which is a phenomenal little way to get us into these mini games. And the way the mini games are set up in, I want to say, all of the Tiny Toon games is just so intuitive. Like I don't want to use the word intuitive anymore. It is so fun and such a great way to make kids keep playing the game, but also be immersed in that world even more, because this couldn't happen in a Mario game, or it couldn't happen in something that's not based on a cartoon property. The way that it utilized just like chance or like puzzle solving, the little things that it did. And this is even or this goes further even in wacky games, which is another Tiny Toons game that I loved. And they really took their time with how would a Tiny Toons game interact with a child player who is obsessed or who likes the show. And I feel like they did a good job. And I also feel like Steven Spielberg had to have had a hand in the creation of some of these, because he was all about the franchise and he wanted to pump it into our veins as kids. And, I think they did the best job possible with this.
I
totally agree.
And I just to take it like a step further into the video game geek angle of it.
Go for it.
The team that was developing a lot of like the licensed kind of like franchise or like IP based titles at Konami, at the time, they eventually left Konami to start their own development studio called Treasure. And Treasure, for anyone who doesn't know, is very well respected and well regarded kind of indie developer who, throughout their existence as a company, have created a ton of cult classics and just really beloved titles, including a later, actually I think the last Tiny Toons game, Buster's Bad Dream, which was a Game Boy Advance, I believe.
Is there a bed on the cover?
What's that?
There's a bed on the
I think
cover.
there's a cartoon bed.
Yeah.
And so Treasure, eventually developed that as well. And they did the Ronald McDonald side scroller, which was pretty fun. But so it had been that team at Konami that was known for kind of doing the license stuff, and the things that they did with their own kind of standalone titles that were not based on any existing IP. And their whole business model was basically we'll take the money to make a Tiny Toons game. We'll take the money to make, a McDonald's game, and we'll make the best game that we can. But then with that extra money, we will make our own thing with our own original characters that will be super weird. And all of the games that they made, kind of free from any, creative control or constraints, the thing that they're sort of the most well known for is basically packing as much variety and kind of ingenuitive design into a small space as possible. So every level having a twist on whatever genre you're playing, introducing a new mechanic that only gets used in that level. You're playing a side scroller and suddenly it becomes Street Fighter for a second, and then one level you're flying a plane or whatever. And so it would really pack in this level of variety, and in the boss fights as well, just creativity and just trying to put as much bang for your buck as they possibly could into every square inch of it. And I feel you really see the beginnings of that philosophy in Buster Busts Loose, because every level is a completely different, scenery, world, soundtrack. You have the cowboy western level, you have the one where you're playing football and it feels like a different game, you have the Star Wars level. And the fact that it's I think a relatively short game if you're playing straight through it, but there's so many different mini games. Each level is so unique that they really packed a lot into it in a way that holds up. It's genuinely one of the better platformers of the 16-bit generation, and the fact that it's based on Tiny Toons makes it more rad.
Absolutely. And IGN ranked it the 99th in their top 100 SNES games of all time, praising the game for its impressively varied hop and bop platformer. And it's only 6 levels, but the enduring, lasting creativity that is injected into this game really sticks with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why we're still talking about it today.
Yeah.
So next we have another game that is in the same era, and that's Buster's Hidden Treasure. This game was wildly praised for its use of the way that the bonuses happen and the mechanics of, again, the mini games. I'm going to praise the mini games for all of these because they're so wonderful.
Well, it's like putting a Mario Party in a Mario platformer.
Yes, and honestly, I think Tiny Toons did Mario Party before Mario Party did Mario Party, because Tiny Toons Adventures Wacky Sports Challenge came out a couple of years before Mario Party and had all of the known characters, Dizzy Devil, Babs, Buster, Plucky, and Hampton, playing essentially Mario Party games. And this was prior to Nintendo doing that. So I think
Hydrox Oreo situation.
Yeah, right.
There's been a few of those, because I remember they had a Looney Tunes kart racer on the Dreamcast that was
Space Race.
Genuinely a fantastic kart racer. They ported it to later consoles, and the ported version for the PS2 and such was not as good, but the the Dreamcast release of that was a legitimately great kart racer. And I feel it was something that other more mainstream kart racers definitely took some design cues from, the Mario Kart iterations of that, of that era. It's no, Looney Tunes did innovate in some of these video game genres.
Though the characters in that game are cel shaded animated, so it really sticks out, and it's completely unique in that respect.
I miss cell shading. I feel we don't get enough good like cell shading anymore.
Me too. Why did Zelda kill that off? I don't know.
I know, it was so good. Wind
I feel like
Waker's,
that was the last one.
Yeah, so good.
Borderlands?
Oh,
that's
Borderlands.
true. Borderlands is like the current kind of
Yeah.
AAA cell shaded. Yeah, we should play that new one. Anyway,
I'm so obsessed with Borderlands.
Right, but Buster's Hidden Treasure. I'm immediately pulling it up because I know that I've played it, but I did not research it specifically ahead of this, and I apologize.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull an audible. This is going to stay in the show. We are going to talk about any video game featuring these characters that you have a connection with. And I will go first because the first video game I ever beat was the Bugs Bunny Birthday Bash for NES.
Oh.
And
oh my god, I just remembered that game.
I was 3 years old, and it was the
Aw.
first game I ever beat from beginning to end, and I loved every second of it because it had you were playing as Bugs Bunny, and you were literally like 5 pixels, but you were Bugs Bunny, and you were going through this level, and you would run across Yosemite Sam. You would have villain battles with Foghorn Leghorn, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig. All of the characters were there to celebrate Bugs, but in the level themselves, they were the boss battle. And I took it entirely seriously, and I saw I used my little 3-year-old imagination, and it was not a little pixel running on screen. It was Bugs Bunny coming across these characters and doing battle with them. And
Oh my god.
I adored that experience. So much so that I have a podcast about Looney Tunes gaming.
No, I'm so glad to hear you describe that, because I feel like I very much did the same thing. I had the maybe overactive imagination that I would be playing an 8-bit or 16-bit game, and in my mind the actual reality of what is happening is so much more intense. Like
Exactly.
I think that's why I also gravitated a lot towards JRPGs at the time, like Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's very simple sprite graphics. A lot of the combat, it's turn based, and you just select attack from a menu of options,
Right.
and then your sprite just kind of crashes into theirs, and some numbers show you how much damage you did. But in my mind, I'm like, this is an incredible battle. This fight is so cool. These guys have these swords. That guy's on a horse, and I would do that with anything. To the point that I looking back at a lot of games from that generation, it almost in my mind is like this was the impressionist era of video games, where the animation, the level of pixels on screen wasn't able to really convey necessarily that much, and it almost required some goodwill from the player being like, yeah, I'm in this. I'm filling in the blanks in my mind.
Right. That's
Sorry.
incredible.
I was trying to look up the name of the one that I liked.
Oh, what was it?
What is it?
I was confusing it because it had a different name than the one that was the North American release one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure I played this in Central America, so it was called Sheepdog and Wolf.
Yes.
Oh, is
And
this the Wile E. Coyote?
It's called
PS2 one?
Sheep Raider
Yes.
Sheep Raiders.
That game is so good.
That's why it took me a second to find it, because I was just like, I knew it was Sheepdog and Wolf over there. It's Sheep Raider here. That was my favorite one, because that introduced me to stealth gaming.
Nice.
Specifically, getting sheep past Sam was how I learned. It's how I learned to play Assassin's Creed. Until
Right.
eventually, an Assassin's Creed happened.
That's incredible.
Because I remembered playing a few Looney Tunes games, but there weren't enough that I put that much time into, other than Buster Bust Loose. And I'm like, no, Sheep Raider. I actually did enjoy Sheep Raider because I got my brother's PlayStation after he got a PS2.
Uh-huh.
So for me, it was whatever is left over. And he also didn't want to give me any of his games. So that was one of the few that I had found at a place called, it's not Game Crazy, but they had a name ripping off Game Crazy because they were across the street, but they were an independent seller.
Whoa.
Oh,
So
okay.
Game Sanity or something?
I think it was just Game Lunatic or Game something like that, but they were better than Game Crazy. They were very, very good. and they had an incredible like trade-in value that was just unbeatable, and that's how they were able to like match them. And that was one of the games I traded in because I didn't know anything about games. So I was just like, all right, PlayStation. I've got Sheep Raider and Purple Dragon. And I think that's all I need. Dinosaur? Let's do Dinosaur.
Honestly, though, you saying that Sheep Raider was your favorite, like, it might also just canonically be the best Looney Tunes licensed game.
I think it's received that way typically.
It's very good.
Sticking with IGN, they gave it an 8 out of 10 when it came out.
There you go.
And it is highly praised online through playthroughs as well as just the reception overall. And I still see people talking about how great that game is everywhere on social media. And also, it is a really rare game to have a side character of Ralph and Sam. They are the sheepdog and wolf characters in Looney Tunes, where Ralph is usually confused with Wile E. Coyote because they have similar attributes.
Because it was
but
Wiley.
Ralph has a red nose and Coyote has a black nose. That's how you tell them apart. And in this game, you have Porky Pig, Elmer Fudd, Yosemite Sam, Gossamer, Toro, and Roadrunner going up against Ralph through different things. And then Ralph goes to space and battles with Marvin the Martian. It's like insane.
I remember the space stuff and being like, what game was I playing initially? And then another game also did that to me. Rugrats.
Rugrats goes to space?
It eventually goes to space. You find out that it's a dream. But like at one point I was downstairs hiding from a dust bunny, and now I'm in space. And I remember being in the space level because there's like a lot of float mechanic to it. But yeah, I remember at one point being like, how did I get to space? I'm a baby.
I was thinking about Sheep Raider recently because ahead of this recording I was watching the one of them is sort of video game referential. The other is less video game referential, but has a video game reference in the title. But of the Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max, Portal Kombat, and there's like a virtual reality episode that I forget the title of. But specifically the Wile and Roadrunner short Portal Kombat. I was watching that, and I was thinking like, I would love a game that like really let me cut into like Acme items, a game that like really played up that angle. Like I would love, like a AAA, like high def 4K 3D Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner game where I get to, build and play with these different absurd contraptions. And then I had that thought, I was like, wait, there was a game that had like some ridiculous Acme items, and it was Sheep Raider. Sheep Raider was the one that like actually let you play with some of that. And I think that was the last time that we really got to explore like that angle of like the ridiculous like technology and items of the world that I think they should mine more. There's so much good stuff.
I'm so sorry, Looney Tunes. I'm so sorry, Looney Tunes. But for both weapons, writing, and performances, and honestly animation, the best Looney Tunes game that exists right now is not Looney Tunes, it is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart.
It's a very good point. It's a very good
You're
point.
not wrong.
Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, when I played it recently, like, clearly it's all inspired by Looney Tunes. Like, clearly it's very, like, Looney Tunes-inspired performances and comedy, like, right down to, like, oh my god, my best henchman is taking maternity leave. Like, the kind of, like, humor that's injected to it and, like, the kind of cartoon violence that exists. Mm-hmm. But, like, the weapons, what they do, how they're designed, and how they work, the fact that you have a sprinkler that turns people into topiaries, the fact that you have a gun that talks back at you like it's your ex-wife, like... There are so many, or like the character of Mr. Fun Guy, who's a fungus that's a fun guy, but he also poisons everyone. So much of the Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart universe and Ratchet and Clank in general is like if Looney Tunes got AAA money.
Yeah,
wow.
The weapons do feel very Acme. I remember even going back to like the first Ratchet and Clank, there's a gun that would turn people into chickens, and then you could suck the chickens up and launch them at other enemies.
There's a commercial for it that I remember.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that to the conversation, Vanessa. Absolutely. Inspired games also have a part in this conversation of like, I totally saw, and there have been overlays through all of these that are like, oh, it's Mario Brothers, or oh, it's Sonic, just with Looney Tunes characters. But yeah, let's definitely like talk about like, oh, it's a Looney Tune based character dynamic, or like the humor is so ingrained. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Conker's Bad Fur Day, because we would not have Conker's Bad Fur Day
Yes.
without Looney Tunes first.
100%. Yeah. I always forget that angle exists too. That's the very like, what if Looney Tunes was edgy?
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
like,
No,
yeah.
exactly. And they parody, and my favorite part of it is they parody the Matrix. And like,
Yeah,
you
they
could
do
never
the movie
have
parodies.
you could never have a parody in a Looney Tunes property from that era of the Matrix, or something that was rated R for kids.
Right.
Even though they snuck one in for Space Jam with that Pulp Fiction one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like having those out there also add to the conversation. So, either it be raunchy or, tame, like Ratchet and Clank. I'm so glad that these games exist and these franchises are still going. Like there's Ratchet and Clank is still strong. And
yeah,
that's,
they just had its first new game in a minute, and it's bragging. So it's my first review I did for X-Play was Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and I've played many games on the PS5 since, and I cannot tell you another game that is more perfectly developed to use everything that completely encompasses like the features of why you would want a PS5, like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart does. Because it really does do like the fourth wall breaking that other games can do, but it uses all the mechanics of the PS5 by like integrating like the volume in your controller and like the haptic response to where it's like cartoons are real now. Like it has that like breaking the fourth wall in the most literal sense by using new technology. And so it's the kind of thing like wouldn't exist without Looney Tunes, but also if you have a PS5, sometimes you'll play certain games and you're like, this is amazing. Why is it worth having a PS5 for? That is the one game that proves to you why that console is worth it. And it's because it like uses Looney Tunes mechanics to I don't know, bring gaming to that level of like connection that you'd only have when Bugs would look at you, the audience member, and like pull down a screen or something like that.
Right. Or cut the scissors of the film and walk out and be like,
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because like the fact that
That's
the game's
such a good bit.
It's such a good bit.
So good.
And like I loved seeing it come up in things like Gremlins, where like it had like a similar like influence because Joe Dante was like, I want to make.
I forgot the Gremlins 2 opening with Bugs and Daffy, right?
Yep.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's good stuff.
So you see it a lot in like those universes where like it was somebody that was like, I want the viewer to know that I see them. And anytime it's like a piece of media like that, it can't help but be like, but it's because we're doing Looney Tunes.
Yes. First of all, congratulations on doing that, the article and like covering that game. Second of all, you just sold a PS5. So I'm going to go buy one.
Amazing.
Honestly, Rift Apart and
it's so fun.
Actually, the Astro's Playroom, which is the game that it comes with, is also it's very fun.
There's a lot of good PS5 stuff. We'll talk PS5.
But Rift Apart is like the one for that because they even have the villain in Villain Song sing like a villain song at the end, which is fantastic.
That's fun.
But the most like everything is cartoons part about it is like the universal traversing thing.
Oh yeah, you're like going through portals for dimensions and stuff. It's super cartoony.
Wow.
Captain Quark is a Looney Tune. It's great.
Captain Quark is every like Looney Tune superhero.
It's true. I also I don't know how much time we have. I don't know how long an episode generally is, but I want to talk about Buster's Bad Dream.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's only because I consider it like a very underrated or overlooked entry in the Looney Tunes, Tiny Toons video game canon.
I'm going to say it absolutely is.
Yeah, I don't think that it was like super well received at the time because it was a budget title. It was, developed at a lower budget and also released, not as a like full cost title initially. And it shows its budget, but it was developed by Treasure, developers who I've talked about, who I love, but the choice that they made with it I thought was very cool. They didn't go with like the traditional kind of like platformer, or like run around and collect items, or like make difficult jumps like Buster Bust Loose, which is a superior game, and I love. But something that I thought was interesting is that they instead kind of leaned into like the slapstick violence angle and realized like, oh, we can just make an action game. Like we can fully just make a side-scrolling beat 'em up with Tiny Toons characters because that exists in that universe as well.
Right.
And so it had a really fun kind of combat system that was based on like very cartoonishly hitting enemies into other enemies and kind of like juggling them around the screen and bouncing them around the screen. And it just had like it's like a simple game, kind of repetitive because you're just beating people up at every level. But there was something so addictive to me about this combat where it just like, it's hard to explain, but it is rewarding on a very like tactile level. The game just has this like kind of friction where like when you're bouncing enemies into other enemies, it is just like very captivating. It feels like there's some like tangible feedback to it. And that developer later took kind of the same system and with a higher budget did an Astro Boy game called Omega Strain, I believe.
Omega
was also
Factor.
on the Game Boy Advance. Oh, Omega Factor. Thank you.
Yep.
And the Astro Boy game, because it was a little higher budget, a little more polished. That one is like very beloved and got like a lot of critical praise. But everybody kind of slept on Buster's Bad Dream, and I think it's worth playing. It's like very fun character sprites, very cool graphics, and just a really addictive combat style. Like for my money, it's like compulsively playable. I remember just like playing through it a couple of times, knowing that I'm not like unlocking anything new. I'm not trying to speed run it, but there's just something about being Buster and just wailing on guys that was so addictive.
Well, what's interesting actually that you brought up Astro Boy Omega Factor is that that was essentially a continuation of the game mechanics that were introduced in this game. And this game was released in 2002, and it basically had a unique fighting style because it used a partner system, and the partner system allowed for characters to interact with each other in different ways, but it was also a side-scrolling action. Right.
Yeah, it was fun because you could select like from a little roster of characters who you wanted your like assist to be, and they each had a different little attack that they would jump in with.
Yeah.
Which gave it some replay value. It was really fun. I would always pick Babs. I don't know why.
Because she's the best.
Because she's the best.
she's the best.
But also, like, you got Buster, you want Babs in there.
She hosts my favorite Tiny Toons special.
Which one? I know which one. But
are you talking about
Night Ghoulery?
Night Ghoulery? Yeah.
It's my absolute favorite one. Because it's also one of the best examples of like Tress MacNeille as Babs doing something else over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is me as Babs doing Rod Serling. This is me as Babs doing this. She does that a lot as like the Rod Serling character going, or me as Babs doing Rod Serling doing something else. Like, there's so much like specific Tress MacNeille voice work in that she just like puts on display.
Yeah.
But also I'm a big horror movie fan, so the fact that the Tiny Toons are just doing my favorite scary movies.
We all bow down to Tress MacNeille. She's incredible. Yep. And also some sad news. This game was going to have a sequel, but it was canceled for unknown reasons, and it was going to be called Tiny Toons Defenders of the Universe.
Oh,
I'm so mad
cool.
that we didn't get that
What
sequel.
could have been? What could have been?
Oh, wait. I know about this because it was it was a treasure title, and because I'm such a fan of theirs, I remember looking at it at the time. They had released a fighting game, like kind of an arena brawler, similar sort of to Power Stone on the Dreamcast, if anyone played that.
I loved Power Stone.
Yes.
Power Stone 2 especially.
Power Stone 2 is incredible. Yes, absolutely. And it was like in a kind of similar vein, but it was called Rakugaki Showtime, and that did not get released in the United States, but I had like an import copy of it, and loved that. And the was it Defenders of the Universe? Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
It was. Yeah, I remember at the time, the little bit of like gameplay footage or like screenshots that existed, it looked like it was going to be kind of similar in play to Rakugaki Showtime. And I was really hyped about, the idea of this game that never like got officially released in America, but was awesome, getting like an American kind of updated version with Tiny Toons characters. But yeah, I don't know why it was canceled.
Well, no one does.
No one does.
Unknown reasons.
At least one guy does. Yeah. Oh, we should.
But yeah, those are all incredible picks, and thank you for expanding the conversation on Looney Tune gaming. And obviously, there's one out there right now that is a mobile app game called Looney Tunes World of Mayhem, which I cover usually on the podcast. And they release new character iterations and variations weekly. So there's always something to latch on to, but it's a really fun RPG game that
I've
I
actually heard
highly
really
recommend.
good things about it.
It's so fun, and it's so Looney Tunes. It has like dived into more of the pay to play kind of stuff, but there's ways around it, and if you can stomach it, it's worth playing. And Elijah, you brought up Virtual Mortality. That is the David Gemmill short on HBO Max, where Bugs tricks Elmer into putting on these virtual reality goggles, and he just thinks everything is real, but really he's just looking through broken glasses, and
it's such a good bit. It's so,
even just hearing it played out got me real bad.
Yeah, the kind of conceit of it is that Bugs convinces Elmer to try virtual reality so he can finally catch a rabbit.
Yes.
But the virtual reality helmet is it's like a bike helmet with some goggles.
And if you think that's great, wait till you get a load of this virtual bomb.
Wow, it looks so dangerous.
But it's not, because it's virtual.
You know, if this was reality, I would be freaking out right now. But because this is a virtual bomb, I have nothing to be afraid of.
It's not virtual anything. He's just looking through goggles. But it gives him this, kind of false confidence, where as he's getting repeatedly hurt in these slapstick ways, he's like, wow, it almost feels real when I'm on fire. And something I love about that, aside from just like at a glance, it's very like Looney Tunes cartoon absurdity, it's a fun joke. But I'm also a huge VR fan, and multiple times I've put someone in an Oculus Rift for the first time and had them play something, and watching them react. I had my brother play a shooting game, and I'm looking on the screen at what he's seeing, and I watch him in first person virtual reality get shot in the chest with a shotgun, and in real life clutches his chest and almost falls over because he was so immersed in it that he's like, I was just shot, I've died, I'm gone now. And I love it because it's so close to no, that could happen. I could see myself in VR being like, wow, it feels like I'm actually on fire. This is incredible. and just not register that real danger was happening to me.
It is one of those shorts that really sticks with you after you see it. So I highly recommend that one. And you can catch all the new Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max streaming now. And I think we have a new one dropping this week. I could be wrong, but there was something teased for April Fool's. So either it was a joke or we're going to have a new cartoon to watch. Either way, it's a win for us because there's new Looney Tune content out there. And I know that new shorts are going to be coming in another batch next month. So there's something always to look forward to. Just to quickly run down games that we didn't fully talk about, but have left an impact on my childhood would be the Daffy Duck, the Marvin Mission, which is a Duck Dodgers game for SNES by Sunsoft. Roadrunner's Death Valley Rally, which was a terrible game. It had you play as Roadrunner as you're trying to escape Wile E. Coyote from catching you. But then it goes to space and you have Marvin the Martian there. And I don't understand why we went to space.
Always go to space.
Always go to space. But also the mechanics of that game are really hard. You're trying to run away, but everything feels like you're in slow motion.
I was going to say, I remember the movement because he takes a second to accelerate. And so you don't actually feel fast, but then when you start moving fast, you can't really control it. It's like the ice levels of other video games that no one likes. It was so difficult.
Fantastic comparison. It's like the entire game is an ice level.
Oh, it was rough.
It was really rough. And I wanted so desperately to beat it because I love those characters, but I could not. I could not get myself to get through it. Rabbids Rampage, which is another Bugs Bunny game and almost a remake of that earlier game I talked about, which was a celebration of Bugs' 50th. This had obviously it was a parody of Duck Amuck, and using the Rabbit Rampage cartoon transitioned into a video game. It had Bugs Bunny, and he was going through all these different worlds trying to collect these paint buckets and putting together the cartoon back, and running into all the characters that you know and love as enemies. And that was always fun to me. There was
Nice.
Yeah. Did you guys ever play that one?
I don't know that one, actually.
Okay. I would recommend it if you can find a retro gaming system, or Twitch it. And then we had two games that I absolutely must highlight, which are two basketball games. And Looney Tunes and basketball usually go really well together, if you don't know.
Usually on a jersey.
Yeah, usually on a jersey. And so one of them is a game based on Space Jam, and you actually played mini games of scenes from the movie. So there's a scene where you and Daffy have to go steal Michael Jordan's shoes, and you have to watch out for his dog Charles. And
I remember this.
Yeah. And in the meantime, there's a game going on, and so like you cut back to the basketball game and do your thing, and it's really fun. I highly recommend it. I had a lot of fun playing it. And the other one is Street Ball Basketball, which is Bugs Bunny B-Ball, and that game was phenomenal.
It's legitimately a very fun, like a good basketball game.
It is.
Yeah.
If you take the Looney Tunes and you put them on a court, what do you want them to do? You want them to do their own special moves that are loony. And that is what they gave these characters. So you pick amongst a roster of 6 people, and you have a 2-on-2, and they basically have specials that you can charge up to. And then Bugs Bunny will cross-dress to, put a defensive line on, or you would have somebody who like Yosemite Sam, like shoot the ball from half court into the hoop, and nothing but net. So like, it had different mechanics to it that were so unique to a basketball game that I have yet to see since, which is really weird because we have so many Blitz games and, all those other arcade games based around, we have NBA on NBC, and NBA Jam. Those were also great for basketball, but nothing as loony as Bugs Bunny B-Ball.
No, I'm such a sucker for any like over the top, super like arcadey or fantasy version of a sports game, because like I am not necessarily like a huge sports person, and so a lot of the ones that are more like direct simulation, like a Madden or a FIFA, I get lost in the nuance of it. I'm like, I feel like I don't know enough about football to be good at a Madden game.
That's me with NHL games.
Yeah, but when you give me, something where it's like, oh, but the quarterback has a, special where he lights the ball on fire and throws it at 1,000 miles an hour, I'm like, yes, that's what I want.
I feel like this is a lot of the Def Jam games for me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Def Jam,
yeah.
NBA Street. There's been some good ones.
Yeah, those are good ones. So yeah, that does it for all the games I wanted to highlight. Are there any that you wanted to highlight that we have not talked about, or did we cover it all?
I covered mine, Elijah.
No, I got mine in there with Buster's Bad Dream.
I know.
Cool.
You're itching.
I've been waiting for that soapbox for 20 years. So.
I'm so glad I could supply that for you on a Looney Tunes podcast, unlike any other.
Perfect.
So what a wonderful way to wrap it up. Thank you both for being on, and please tell people online where they can find you.
So basically, I had a different one, and then I had to change it because of my last name. So now I'm NESS Guerrero on Twitter and SNES Guerrero on Instagram. And then you can find me every Tuesday and Wednesday on G4, whether it be twitch.tv/G4TV or YouTube/Tag the Show. That changed now. And you can also find our podcast, Kicking and Screaming, on all forms of social media under Kick Scream Pod.
And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Elijah_pizza. And that's all I've got, because I don't do as much as she does.
Love the pizza, though. Love the pizza at the end.
Oh, same. It was because I only got Twitter to take place in a pizza sweepstakes. It was like Pizza Hut was giving away pizzas, and I was like, all right, I'll make an account just for this, and then I kept it forever.
And then you got doxxed by Pizza Gators.
Oh, that's true. That was a whole thing.
Wow. Well, we love pizza here, so no shame.
Thank you.
No shame.
Yeah.
And you can follow the podcast everywhere at This Means Pod or This Means Podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow this podcast wherever you see it. Share it with friends and continue the Looney conversation wherever you go. And of course, you realize that's not all, folks. Have a good one.